Good afternoon and good morning or good evening, depending where you are located in the world, and a warm welcome to our IPMA UCL Megaproject CEO Global Keynote Series. I'm Giuliano Denico, Global Head of our Megaproject SIG at IPMA and Director of the Megaproject Delivery Center at UCL. So this series is part of our scientific exploration of leadership and management practices in megaprojects, and developed in partnership between the IPMA and UCL, often to more than 70 countries around the world every time. And I know we have several executives here joining from different countries and different projects, and I can also see several executives of our MBA in major infrastructure delivery, so that's great to see. So it's a pleasure to welcome today Mikkel Hemmingsen, who is the CEO of Bælt, and he will take us on a journey exploring the Bælt tunnel, which is an outstanding mega project transforming connectivity in Europe, linking Denmark and Germany. In addition to that, I'm sure you saw several posts and information about the project. It is, by all means, a very big mega project. It is the largest infrastructure project in Denmark and the world's longest immersed tunnel. So there is a lot to learn here. Right, before handing over to Mikkel, a few house rules for questions. As we have a very large audience joining us today, we're not operating the chat function, but please do use the Q&A function of the Zoom connection to send us your questions, and we'll come back to the questions at the end of Mikkel's presentation to see patterns and themes and consolidate different areas of curiosity that you might have. Mikkel, thanks very much indeed for joining us today and making the time in your diary to share leadership practices with us. So we are very much looking forward to your global keynote. And without any further ado, the floor is yours. The virtual floor is yours. So over to you. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to share some of the insights which we have gained with you, and I look forward to your questions also. So I'm not an engineer by background, I'm an economist, so bear with me if I can't answer all technical questions regarding how we do these things. I've been with Bælt since 2016, so my role has been to manage the company and also, of course, manage the different projects which we're doing. And what we're doing is that we are financing, building and operating marine infrastructure projects, and we're doing tolling solutions for the Danish government. So that's the two things which we do. That covers different things from tunnels, bridges to flood protection. The Femern link is our third link. We started out doing the Great Bælt link, then we did the Øresund link, and now we're doing the Femern link. So we're building on experiences from other links, where the first one was opened 25 years ago. So why are we doing it? Why do we keep investing in the links? Well, it's because it comes with a great benefit to society. If we take the Great Bælt fixed link, it has already now provided almost 400 billion in returns to the Danish society. And how do you get this benefit? Well, it's from reduced travel time, and it's for reduced prices for traveling. So how do we then do it? How do we operate it? Because I think we've built two projects, and we're currently doing one project, which is actually too big for a country like Denmark if you wanted to finance it over your government budgets. So we have this financing model where the state guarantees our loans, and then we have the users repay the loans when they use our infrastructure. In average, we have 25 to 36 years amortization period, and afterwards the infrastructure has been paid back, and government can take out dividends. So this model, the why and the financing model, we also use for the Fehmarn Belt tunnel, which I will go into, and I will try to explain you how it's being done. I will go into how we are working together with the neighbors, like how are we doing the whole stakeholder management. And last, I will share some of our approaches to risk management, which is also important when you do such a big project. So why are we doing the fixed link? Well, we're doing it because we want to cut off the travel time between Denmark and Germany, meaning from Copenhagen to Hamburg. We can save 160 kilometers by adding this link. And the idea is that should then also make it more feasible to transport goods by rail instead of by lorry. So on top of building a link, we're also building a new railroad connection from Copenhagen to Rødby, and our German counterparts are building a new railroad connection from the island of Fehmarn down to Lübeck. And this is all part of a trans-European transport network where the two biggest projects in Europe right now are actually part of making this corridor working. It's our Fehmarn Belt tunnel, and then it's a Brenner-based tunnel, which is being dug through the Alps between Austria and Italy. So what we're doing is that we're building the world's longest immersed tunnel. So why are we doing a tunnel? Well, there were two concerns which were critical in choosing this. One was that a bridge would impact the current and would have an ecological impact on the Baltic Sea. And then second, that a bridge across one of the busiest waters in Northern Europe with 70,000 annual ships or a big ship sailing through would also have a risk of somebody hitting one of the pillars of the bridge. So the decision was to make a tunnel, and this tunnel would then be the world's longest immersed tunnel, 18 kilometers, and with a construction budget which in today's prices is above 10 billion euros, but 100% user financed. So the Danish taxpayers are actually not paying anything into this project. It's purely user financed by us. How do we then do it? Well, it is a Lego approach to building tunnels. So saying that if you have a bore tunnel, then your boring machine is very critical. Here we are using 79 standard elements and 10 special elements, which are then being laid one after another in an excavated tunnel which has been dredged, and then eventually they meet in the middle, and we can then open the tunnel for both rail and car and lorry traffic. So it's, to make it easier understandable, it's like putting one Lego block after the other ones. 79 of them are similar, and 10 of them are special with a little basement for technical and electrical equipment. And if you then compare it to Legos, I think the big difference is that they are a little bit bigger. They are 270 meters long. They have a width of 42 meters, and they're 9 meters high, and they actually weigh 77,000 tons each. So it's very big Lego blocks. And as I said, this is part of a larger investment. So we are investing around 10 billion at the Fehmarn Belt tunnel, and then our German colleagues are investing in building a hinterland railway and a hinterland motorway, and we have also invested around 1.3 billion in building a new railway down to the tunnel. So a very big project if you combine both the hinterland and the link. The way we operate in Sund and Bælt is that we have 4 divisions. So we have one division which is focused on planning, one which is focused on the whole environmental impact assessment and getting the plan approval, since that with especially EU regulation is a rather complex job. Then we have one division doing construction, and then this division will then hand it over to operation and also to the people who does the tolling, so that we can collect some revenues to pay for our loans. The way the Femern contract delivery model is that it's been divided into several sub-projects. And the reason why we don't have one big project is that there were a risk that no company would be able to take the full risk of doing the whole project. So it was decided to split it into minor contracts, which of course gives us the challenge of managing the interfaces between the contractors. It's based on a bespoke FIDIC Silver Book, so it's a design and build contract. And we have the normal, what should we say, dispute resolution mechanisms with a DRB. The companies which were chosen to build the link are divided into 4 contracts, or where you can say there are 5, but 2 of the contracts are being handled by the same joint venture. It's a joint venture where you both have some contractors and you also have some dredgers. Then there's a whole dredging contract, and then there's the installation contract, and then at the end we will also have the railway contract, where we have to put down the tracks for the railway. What you see here is the site where we're building it. You can see to the left it's the existing ferry harbor, and then to the right it's our factory where we are producing these tunnel elements. And this is actually the world's biggest cement factory. It consists of as you can see, there are some factory buildings which are equipped with air conditioning, so that we have the same temperature all year long, so that we can do the whole casting with the same temperature to actually control the hardening process of the concrete. Then at the right you can see there's the tunnel portal. That's where the trains and cars will enter into the tunnel. Then there's the tunnel trench, which you can see as a white line connecting Denmark and Germany. Then just south of the tunnel portal, we have the tunnel village, and so we actually constructed a place where all the people who are non-local can live. And it's been very important for us that the living conditions were adequate and were meeting the standards which we expect in Denmark. So all workers have their own room, their own bed, their own bathroom, and a little desk where they can work or they can watch TV. So it's actually a little village which we have built next to it. South of that we have what we call Campus Femern. It's where we have the apprentices, which we are having 500. Then if we move back to the factory, you can see we have two piers. We have one pier where all the steel comes in, and we have one pier where cement and other raw materials come in, and then it meets in the factory where they do the casting, and then it's being pushed out into the basins, and before it's being sailed out to be immersed at the tunnel portal. This is a picture from the casting where you can see the different robots working also. It's the robots for the cement. There's also being used robots for actually carrying the the steel into the casks. So quite a bit of automatization is going on in the whole casking process. It takes around 5 days now to do one section, and each element consists of 9 sections. So to do one element, 240 meters long, it takes 9 weeks, and one section takes 5 days, and that's actually the minimum time which we can do it on, if we have to allow the concrete to also become hard. I can say that there's a very steep learning curve when you do that. I think the first section took more than 1 year to do. So a very high productivity curve here. What you also can see in the harbor is that once the elements are being pushed out into the dock, well, then they actually float. And when the docks are full, like we've built parking spaces outside where they can be parked until we are ready for the immersion process. Yeah, here's another picture from another angle where you can see the different elements being made and being made ready to be pushed out. This is the portal where you will enter from the Danish side, and which is advancing very fast right now. And this is the German side, where we also have a portal, and where we also are building about a 1 kilometer stretch inland with rail and a highway to connect to the German hinterland connections. So if we go back to like how we're working in Bælt, then we, as many other companies, have an ESG strategy, and some of the things which are important to us is when we look into sustainable governance is a whole citizen involvement thing. I think one thing which we have learned is that if you don't involve citizens in your projects, then they will eventually, in a small democracy like the Danish one, be challenged, and that can become a big problem for the projects if citizen support is lacking. And I will get back to what happened in Germany to this project. We care a lot about social sustainability. It's both about not having accidents. It's about building with care, meaning that we take care of our workers, and we're also training the workforce of the future. So in every project we do, we have KPIs for how many apprentices will be trained and educated. When we look into the environmental part of it, we of course have the climate goals where we're going to reduce our CO2 footprint with 70%. We build with nature, meaning that we try to integrate nature into what we're doing. I'll also give you some examples of that. And then we talk about sustainable infrastructure. So all our infrastructure is built to last at least 120 years. So that it will last across several generations. So one thing about building with nature is, for instance, when we have all the excavated material, which we dig up of the Fehmarn Belt, well, then we use that to make new land. And when we make these new lands, well, then we build small lakes like this. We look at which kind of flora and fauna would we like to have to ensure biodiversity. So we're actually claiming that we are creating more nature than we are taking away when we do our projects. And this we call building with nature. Citizen dialogue. At the island of Fehmarn, they didn't really love our project in the beginning for different reasons. Some people didn't want to have freight trains going through the island. Other people were afraid to lose their jobs at the existing ferry connection. So what we have done is actually that we have invited the citizens inside. We have local guides, like the person you can see at the PowerPoint, who actually bikes around and talks to the people. So So we try to listen to what are their concerns, and we try to accommodate these concerns in our solutions. And the sooner you do it, the easier it is to actually get it accommodated. So right now, I think we have a very good collaboration with the local population in Germany, as well as with the German Naturbund, which I think we have educated also in working like we do in Denmark, where we have a very close collaboration between these nature NGOs and ourselves as the owner, where we actually try to create the nature together, which we would like to have more of. Local engagement is also, newsletters, it's text information to everybody who wants to keep up to speed. It's exhibition centers. So we have an exhibition center in Rødbyhavn where we have 50,000 annual visitors. We've just built a little exhibition, or not a little one, a big exhibition viewpoint where we've had 100,000 visitors in the last 4 months. So we really try to engage with the local community about what it is that we're doing here. We train the future workforce. At the Bælt project alone, we train 500 apprentices. We take them, it's both blue and white collar, and we see that as part of our mission too, to actually make sure that we have somebody who can also execute the next generation of projects, which we will have to do. Giving back to local community, what you can see here at the map is actually all the new land which we have developed. You can see to the left of this harbor, you can see we've built a land which is very suited for tourism, so that the local municipality can build hotels, who will then get access to very nice beaches which have been designed for children, grown-ups, etc. And then at the right side, we are building nature. We're also saying that once we are done with our projects, then we'll give the whole harbor back to the local community, and they can turn it into a hub for offshore wind, for instance. So we're trying to give back to the local community when we do something. So that's what we're doing, and also some of the things we're trying to do with the whole CSR policy. So how do you then manage risk? Well, I think one thing that we have done in our risk management is that we have said to ourselves, well, we might as well be open about the issues which we will face, because we will face issues. That's just how it is to do big projects and small projects. And one of the things which you can do, as I see it at least, is that you can be open about your risk and then invite other experts in to help you mitigate these risks. So we have this committee which meets with us and discusses, and it's externally appointed people who then meets with us and then discusses how can we mitigate the risk, or based on their experience, what will future risks be, which we then discuss the mitigation of. And I think this is a trust exercise. You have to share your dirty laundry with these people, and then in return they try to help you. And that's very difficult for many professional organizations that I've worked with, at least, is that we don't like to share our dirty laundry. And my approach here is that we might as well get it fixed as soon as possible, because it will eventually become a problem, and the problem won't become smaller just because you wait. We also have what we call the CSR dialogue, is that we take the unions, the heads of the unions, and we invite them inside, and we discuss how can we create a good working space. What is important for them? How can we accommodate that without so that it doesn't end up becoming a problem for the project, which it sometimes do when you miss out on that too. And then last, commissioning. So what we also have done here is that we actually started our commissioning work around 7 years before, or actually 8 years before we would open the tunnel. Why? Well, because you need to collect your documentation. You need to, right from the beginning, you have to get it in the right format. You have to start planning for your testing, etc., as soon as possible, unless you want to wait extra time once you have your infrastructure ready before you can actually start using it. And I think that's the most annoying thing you can have, is that you can have an infrastructure which is ready, but you can't use it because you didn't get your documentation or your approvals right. So we started commissioning very, very early. So what are some of the conclusions that I can share with you if you want to be successful? And I'm sure there are more, and we are also not always successful. But some of the things which we have learned is that you actually have you have to have a strong owners organization. You have to have an organization that is as competent as your contractor to plan ahead and to mitigate risks. And the more interfaces, the stronger owners organizations you have to have. You have to open up to risk reviews and learning from experience, not also including your own experience. So a lot of risk management is actually based on competent people moving from one project to another project, but there's also a lot of things which you can learn from digging into former risk registers, etc. You have to develop partnership models with your stakeholders. I showed you some of the things which we have done with both NGOs and with local citizens to get the legitimacy of such a big project. You have to work with your authorities. The EIA process is becoming increasingly difficult, and I think you can really get stuck in that process if your government authority, which you have to deal with, isn't what shall we say, up to speed with what you are doing. And I don't think you can expect a public authority to have experts in all areas. So then it's your job as an owner to provide the expertise, which actually makes it possible for them to make the decisions which have to be made. And when I say possible here, is that we have to provide all the information in a way that makes it easy to work together. And then last, you have to have contracts where the risk distribution and risk management are clear. And I think risk distribution is always difficult because a project always ends up costing what it actually costs, no matter how you started out your contract, because not too many contractors wants to work for free. So since things do happen, it's also a very good idea to have a contingency reserve for when you're needed for a rainy day. And in mega projects, you also have rainy days, and since they're mega, it can rain a lot. So you have to have some money in reserve for these days. And I think those were the slides. So now I'll stop sharing, and you can ask questions.
Fantastic. Thanks very much indeed, Mikkel, for a wonderful presentation. We have a few questions here, and I have my own questions as well, obviously, in advance. If I can encourage the audience to submit the questions through the Q&A box, that will be the right time to do so. If I could start with the question of client organization there, Mikkel. You mentioned the client's role as managing the world around you and your contractors.
Yes.
During the presentation, you also mentioned the interfaces and how many interfaces you created in terms of JVs and so on. Can you perhaps expand a little bit the rationale on how you developed that procurement strategy and how many interfaces or joint ventures? Was the market consulted on that? How did you come to this final configuration to work with the market?
So what we wanted to do was to have contracts that weren't so big that we would scare away the market from actually making the bids. Since you know that once you enter into a contract, there's also some guarantees which have to be made. And if you have a 10 billion euro project, you can imagine you're talking about quite big guarantees. So the idea here was basically to reduce the contracts so that as many as possible would participate in the tendering process, knowing that the market for these mega projects is not actually that big. You don't have that many companies who are both able and willing to actually enter into it. So the interfaces here were or the contracts were created so that it was coherent units, you could say. And I think if you look back at it today, I think I would perhaps have changed an interface or two due to what we have seen happening, because I think the learning is that every interface is room for a problem. It's room for a conflict. When one contractor has to hand over to the next contractor, it's a great opportunity to claim because you know it's even though you have interface agreements, there's a gray zone with a risk for discussion here.
Excellent. And if I can follow up on that, so we talked a lot about the interfaces and between the interfaces of JVs.
Yeah.
But if we reflect back on the client organization, what we are observing around the world is clients perhaps optimally procuring or developing a procurement strategy and establishing interfaces, but they forget to develop the internal capability to actually integrate those interfaces. So you might have 30 plus interfaces and capacity to do integration of 5 inside the client organization. So I was wondering, after this process that established the resulting supply chain, perhaps, how was your rationale to build up capability inside the core client organization to coordinate that?
So what we did was that we have, our client organization is 250 people. So around 50 of them are specialized in environmental matters, you know, keeping the permits up to date, applying for new permits, making sure that we are meeting all the different requirements for all the different investigations that we have to do all the time. So there's actually quite a bit of work that has to be done there, even after you have your EIA. Then we have 200 people working on the contracts. So each contract has a contract director, and then they are facilitated by a technical director and joint, or shall we say, legal office, which are then managing that part of the contract, which turns into claims, and then we have this organization which also goes across the board, this commissioning unit, which is annoying everybody by saying that they should actually provide the documentation in the right standards so that we can move on to the next phase. So you have some silos in your organization focused around a contract, and then you have some mechanisms where you try to bridge between the contracts. And for us, it's this technical division and it's a commissioning division who are trying to do that. So they will tell you that, well, you need to have the documentations from the people doing the tunnel elements so that the guys doing the installation can actually get access to them when they need them. So you both have silos and you have mechanisms working across the boards. And then you have a joint risk register, which also goes across all different contracts.
Excellent. We have a number of questions here on the political nature of managing this specific mega project, and different participants reflecting on it is already hard enough to manage one government, and you have two nations to engage in the political layer. So could you expand on the agreement perhaps between the client and both governments, and how do you handle this external political layer around you? So how much influence do they have to change scope, for instance? So this is a big problem that we're observing in many jurisdictions, where the client is incredibly competent to manage the delivery, but the political layer is interfering without delivery knowledge, perhaps with more policy lenses, and that's not particularly helpful to anybody. They don't understand scope and cost.
Well, I would say that it's difficult to manage one government. Managing two is very difficult, and I think what we got right here, if I look at some of the things which we got right, was that my organization is actually doing the whole tunnel. Like, you know, like the Brenner Base project, each country is doing half a tunnel. I would say if we had such an organization, I would have resigned many years ago. That would just be not doable. So I think the first thing you do is that even though you have two governments involved, you have to have one organization who can actually coordinate the actual building works themselves. Then you have to have pretty good connections into both governments, in this case the Danish and the German government, and you have to have that connection at all levels. So we are dealing both with the federal level, with the state level, and with the local level. And you have to work with all different levels, and they have different issues. So local level can be like, where do the workers live? Where do they shop? You know, these things. State level can more be like, so we have to provide you with some of your permits, etc. Do we feel confident in doing that? We have to build access roads and things like that. And then you have the federal level, which in our case have made a state treaty, but they both have to allocate the money to actually do, for instance, a railroad and things like that. And the Danish and German systems are very different here. So in Denmark, it works like that. You make a proposal for a construction law, then you vote on it in parliament with a simple majority, and then off you go. Whereas in Germany, you have this tradition where you complain to the local court, then you go to the next court, then you go to Supreme Court. So a rather long process compared to how we do it in Denmark, and we have had to accommodate both processes, which can of course be difficult. But I would say still, number one, is you have to have one organization who can actually act, and then I think two, the fact that we are user financed means that we don't have to ask for more money in two parliaments at the same time. Those are some of the mitigating factors you can do.
That's a very comprehensive expansion of the topic. Thank you. The Lego tunnel is really capturing the imagination here of several members, and I guess the question is around modularity as a topic. So you expanded a little bit on the segments of the tunnel and so on, and some of the components are the same and some different. Can you expand perhaps on how did you arrive in this particular decision of building a huge factory? You mentioned the biggest cement factory as well on site. How did you arrive in this configuration of producing on site, and whether that modularity, that's another question here, would expand to other parts, more technological parts of your project, perhaps railway systems and so on, or it stops with the tunnel itself?
So what we're doing is that we actually made, so when we did the Øresund link, we did a 4-kilometer submerged tunnel. So we knew that it could be done, and then the difference between Øresund and what we're doing now is that Femern is twice as deep. So, and it's 18 kilometers long, not only 4 kilometers long. So we had to change the technique. But one of the things which we learned when we did the Great Bælt Bridge was that if you make an element which is really wrong, you can actually blow it up, and then just make a new one. So that's the advantage of modularity. As you can see, we have 6 production lines. So if one of them doesn't work, it doesn't stop the whole program. So you have a more, I would say, robust way of producing, where you can learn, and you can also make mistakes, which doesn't jeopardize your whole project. So what we will do, like when we are done with the Femern tunnel, we actually already now preparing for the next tunnel, which is going to be a submerged tunnel around Copenhagen. So we're going to use the same factory in Rødby to do the next tunnel, which is going to be 10 kilometers long, and it's going to be around Copenhagen. By using this model which we have, so we are saving both time and money to build a new factory. Such a factory actually costs 1 billion euros. And we are making sure that the skills which we have learned can then be reused in the next project, even though it's shorter and doesn't have rail. So we are trying to build, I think you could compare it to a shipyard, right? So we build a shipyard, we can build different kinds of vessels, and we can build very big vessels here. And once we have reached the level of productivity which we want to, we can actually do it fast. So the one thing which we are missing, which is our current problem at Femern right now, is that so we have 6 production lines, but we only have 1 immersion pontoon. And I think right now we would like to have a couple more of those, because we're having problems getting the one we have up to speed, because that's also a prototype. So I think whenever you can have things which you can replicate, that's good for your project.
That's the perfect connection with the next question around knowledge transfer and the codification. I think you mentioned that in your short video. How do you codify that knowledge and store somewhere and transfer it, given that you don't have enough experienced people around to attract, even if you could? So I wonder, efforts, mechanisms, so how do you actually extract lessons, innovation, and actually transfer to other organizations more centrally, or to other projects? What are the practical strategies that you have in place beyond an intranet, for instance? But it's something that you developed quite extensively, and it is this replication emphasis that comes from modularity as well, but you're talking about knowledge and codification of that knowledge, which is super interesting.
As you know, like when you do such a project, there's a lot of codified knowledge. There are contracts, non-conformance reports, status reports, risk registers. So there's a lot of codified knowledge. And I think one of the problems which we are seeing here is that there's so much knowledge that it's just too much knowledge. So nobody will ever sit down and read the contract for the previous projects. So what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to use AI to say, like, how can we use AI to extract the knowledge we know. For instance, we did this case where we took the risk registers of the 2 existing links and says, what went wrong? How did we mitigate it? And then we transfer that into saying, so which are the factors which we will have to not repeat? And that were like issues like, for instance, get all documentations in the right format from the beginning. Make sure you start planning for the certifications, not 6 months before you need to get your approval, but do it right from the beginning. Like find out which informations do you need. How do you incentivize different contractors to work or to collaborate across an interface? So we can see that it's very much the same problems that are being repeated. And so we're trying to use AI to actually extract that knowledge and saying, what is it that we should look for? Because otherwise you end up, that's my experience at least, you end up relying on very smart people. And that's very good if you can get access to them. But you know, people also get older and then they retire, and then you can't expect them to work so much anymore. So I think you have to say that there's a lot of knowledge. You just have to be better at making it accessible to also to students of major projects, because it's very often the same mistakes that people make.
Couldn't agree more. And the other question here, the elephant in the room, is always around cost. But I would argue we need a way better understanding of data sets on costs and scope variations than just before and after projects, right? But if we unpack a little bit, and things change during 10, 15, 20 years of a project, how do you ensure that transparency of knowing where exactly costs are going up with your JVs, with your supply chain? What mechanisms do you have as a client to understand, perhaps in a more granular perspective, what's going on in particular interfaces in terms of scope, time, and cost?
I think so. As I see it, you have 2 kinds of, if you take like the extremes, you have 2 kinds of project. So one is I transfer all risk to the contractor. I pay a huge risk sum for that, a big lump sum. Then I reserve some money for unexpected things, right? Because even though I transferred all risk, I will probably have to pay for some risk which I didn't account for. We've had COVID, we've had Ukraine, you know, there's things happening which you didn't expect even in the most perfect contract. So that's the one end of it, like you transfer all risk. Then at the other end, you have the cost plus contracts, where you actually say risk is too big for us to actually put into a box and then wrap it, because I don't know what the risk is, and you as a contractor don't know it. So you as a contractor would like to have a big reserve, and I would think that this reserve is too big. So you have both ends of the contract here for managing costs. When you move into an cost plus model, then you open the books, right? So it's a more transparent model, but it's also a model which is more difficult to manage for an owner, because you have to be much more on top of it. In the other model, the typical model, well, you get a claim, right? You get a variation. You can sit around, discuss forever, and eventually after 10 years, you might figure out whether you have to pay it or not. So you have two very different models, and each model requires very different things from the owner's organization. So I think, as I see it, it's very much a question about distribution of risk. If you don't want to manage too much risk, then you pay an insurance premium for that in the beginning. If you can take in more risk, then you can move towards a cost plus model, but then you have to have an organization that can manage it. It will probably cost the same to carry out the project, but your involvement as an owner will be very different depending on which model you choose.
That's a very interesting observation, and of course we saw, for instance, last week the conclusion of Tom Steinway tunnel, and one of the core arguments for the success of that organization was essentially the time they spent in terms of developing the culture of the organization, who we are as a client, our identity, what are we willing to manage or not. Yeah. And what we're finding in our research is that often organizations don't spend that time in the very front end of projects to develop this understanding of who we are as a client and what is the risk that we are comfortable in managing. And so I wonder if there was a central function in your organization. So if we reflect back on understanding the risk that we want to manage, but equally this evolution that you mentioned over the length of the project, if you need to adapt the client organization, is there a function, is there a team responsible for that? Who is doing the adaptation of the client organization? Who is taking care of understanding what should adapt and how?
Well, I think basically if you are a contract director, so you're both very skilled in doing your technical part, but you should be as skilled in managing a relationship. And I think what you're dealing with here in Megaprojects, I think we have alone on our side, we have 37 nationalities working. And you know, the way we Danes say things, people say that we're more direct. So we say things as we see them very often, right? I think that we goes very good together with the Dutch. They're also direct. Other people would consider us rude because, you know, why couldn't you be a little bit more polite when you say things? We consider other nationalities to be arrogant or to be, you know, so we all have different, what you say, characteristics, which comes with our upbringing somehow. And then we mix that together. And I agree, like it's very important for a project to have somebody who's responsible for managing cultural differences across teams. And I've seen it go wrong too, but I've also seen it go wrong with only Danish teams, you know, that we don't understand each other. I think one of the things which I've seen, which we haven't done yet at our project, but which I think we will do, is actually to make joint side offices, saying that people will have to sit together. I think the model which we have on Femon, which is a design build fixed price model, actually breeds more conflict because you know, all changes come through variations or through claims. So that's in itself conflictual. And I think so when you have a contract which incentivizes conflict, then you have to be even more careful about managing the cultural relations, both as an owner but also as a contractor. And I think one of the things which you can do is to have a joint side office. Like, so when you sit together, when you eat together, it's also easier sometimes to find solutions for problems as when you sit in each of your office buildings, you know, and you just send letters to each other.
Very, very interesting. And the other stream of questions here that we have, and obviously we didn't touch so much on this until now, is on leadership.
Yeah.
And you made a very good point in your video on a solutions-driven leadership style.
Yeah.
And equally moving away from this centralization, perhaps in the CEO, you have your senior leadership team. So there's a group of people empowered to deliver different parts of the project.
Yeah.
So I guess the reflection here would be, if we are to move away from this let's blame the CEO type of thing, that it's not helpful at all.
No.
How do we see advice to future CEOs that are putting together their senior leadership teams and different parts of the organization? So what would you say in terms of reflections to build leadership teams inside a delivery organization?
Well, I think you don't want to be your CEO to be the bottleneck, right? And I think that can very easily happen. That the more you want to control, the more you become the bottleneck. So to get away from that, you have to delegate authority to actually make solutions. And so, and one thing is the whole delegation. The other thing is to make people brave enough to actually want to have something delegated to them. So you need to encourage people to be brave. You need to encourage people to be willing to take the risks. And so what we're working on in our company is what we call secure-based leadership, saying that a leader should actually encourage an employee to go out there and look for a solution, even though it includes taking a risk. And that we don't fire people for looking for solutions. We actually encourage it. And we also acknowledge the fact that looking for solutions also means that you sometimes will end up making the wrong solutions. But that's part of it. And so I think it's all about delegating, and it's all about making your people feel comfortable about having delegated this authority to actually look for solutions. And it sounds very easy because you say, well, won't everybody go out there and be daring, trying to look for solutions? Well, a lot of people, as I see it, are actually trying to avoid getting into having too much authority delegated, because there's a risk with it. And so you have to make your people feel comfortable about taking this risk. And otherwise we're getting nowhere.
Excellent. And I think that's a reflection that you made with innovation as well. So you can't kill people that are trying to innovate, and
No.
it's the same line of
sort
of rationale and cultural trait of the organization.
I think that we have this policy in our company, and now I'm being very Danish when I say this, that we don't want competent assholes, but we would very much like competent people. So we kill people for being assholes, but being competent also means taking a risk. You don't get fired for that. So if you're nice and you're competent, then we would really like you to join our company, and we will take care of you.
Fantastic. Recognizing the time and appreciating your very busy, Mikkel, perhaps final reflections and your observations. So what would you like to see, perhaps top 3 things that you would like to see implemented in future mega projects that they could learn from the Fehmarn experience and past mega projects that you were involved?
Well, I think this thing about using modern technology, especially AI, to actually make the experiences of others more available. Like, why can't I get a pre filled out risk register, for instance? So we have to be smarter at learning from previous mistakes, because otherwise we not only repeat good things, but we also repeat bad things. Then second, I think we have to develop new models that can, what shall we say, where we can have more risk inside the model. Things are changing fast. We're doing more and more complex projects. It's becoming more and more difficult to actually, what shall we say, have these lump sum projects. So we have to make models where we can have more risk inside the project. And then last, I think I agree with you that if we can find ways to have a more common culture between the owners and the contract organization, where we can share more goals, that could be very nice. So you could say our goal is to have it built on budget, and our contractor's goal is to have it built with a profit. So we have to find a way to combine this in a good way also. So that could be three things: to have better learnings, to have better contracts, and to have better collaboration.
Brilliant. I think that's the perfect note to end on better collaboration and the three learnings. Mikkel, can I thank you once again for joining us and being so candid and honest in terms of sharing your with the Danish direct and approach in terms of sharing the lessons. I think that's very much appreciated and much needed in the world of infrastructure and mega projects, and going exactly to the precise details and the learnings out of it beyond vague solutions that are not particularly helping. So once
You're very
again,
welcome. Hope it was helpful for you.
it was. There's a lot to learn from this mega project. I'm sure those will be explored over several years. In particular, this replication idea that we need to really invest in doing.
Yeah, I think if you want to get productivity in the construction sector, you have to be better at doing replications. I think that's key.
Fantastic. Well, once again, thanks everyone for joining us online for another fantastic CEO keynote. We'll be back in a few months with hopefully more. It will be difficult to beat this one, but more insights on mega projects and leadership. So have a nice day ahead and see you soon.